I'm going to break down tonight's game between the Saints and the Colts and give you my free selection on the side, plus 2 college basketball complimentary plays for this Monday night card as well. But first, I want to go back to the Sunday NFL card and talk about an interesting situation that happened in that Seattle game against Carolina. Now, as you know, I have always been a proponent of buying the half point when games have lines that cross 3, 4, 7, and sometimes 10. And listen, I know that I could be preaching to the choir to half of you out there. It's like trying to convince a Democrat to vote Republican and vice versa. You're either with me or you're against me. And that has always been the case with this particular subject. Me personally, from a gambler who's been gambling long before I was ever in this business to a guy who was run this particular business and created these sites some 19 years ago, I can tell you that buying the hook up or down, depending on the situation, buying that insurance, it's the single most important factor when it's come to gambling that has saved me more money by turning losses into pushes and made me more money by turning pushes into wins than any single other thing that I ever possibly done. But again, it's not like I can convince a drowning man to grab the oar and come into the boat. You're either with me or against me when it comes to that philosophy. But about 9-10 weeks ago, Steve Budin, we had a meeting with all the handicappers. Got them all together on a conference call. Now, you know Steve's background, and if you're not, I'm going to quickly tell you. You know, back in around 1992 or 93, even before I knew Steve, of course, Steve is the guy who created the offshore sports book betting industry. He created it. He was the guy who opened up the first offshore sports book wasn't Costa Rica, in Panama, and then eventually moved it to Costa Rica, took the first telephone wager from somebody in the United States and an offshore sports book. You can read about it all in his book. I think the first chapter of it might be still here on the websites. But bottom line, you know, his father was a bookmaker. He created that offshore sports book industry. His whole background has been as a bookmaker before he got into this business with me. His whole point of the conversation was to tell the guys to really start considering buying that half point when the line crosses 6. And I couldn't agree with him more, because really when you think about it, with the way the 2-point conversion, which has been around for a number of years now, works, you see more and more games hitting around that number 6. And plus, with the state of the field goal kicking, with the specialist, with the shakiness of both field goal kicking and point after attempts, how they're being missed at such a pathetic frequency over this year and last, that number 6 just constantly keeps coming up. So I told the guys, listen, it's a personal preference. To me, if you're not doing it at least at 3, 4, 7, you're nuts. And at 6, I would certainly consider it. But again, I'm not forcing them to do it, just like I can't force you to buy into that premise that it makes perfect sense. So you saw it come into play yesterday. Bob Valentino, the hottest handicapper here at this site, other than up until a week ago, Steven D'Angelo, and Mitchell Newman, of course, has been red hot as well over the past month too. Bob Valentino has just been on a red hot roll in every single sport. Yesterday, he had Seattle. The game was, of course, -6. What did he do? He told you to buy down the half point when that line was anywhere between 6 and 7.5. You bought down the half point. Didn't look like you needed it until Carolina scored those 2 touchdowns in that fourth quarter, especially with that one late. The game falls in 6. You bought it down at 5.5 points. Now listen, if Carolina doesn't score that last worthless touchdown, it's a moot point. What did that insurance cost you? Nothing, because you're going to win that game anyway. But because you spent the couple extra cents on that dollar, you spent an extra 10 cents on that dollar, you picked up a winner, his first ever 200-dime release, and you scored. And as I always like to say, if this was the middle of baseball season and I said, hey, listen, I want you to take Justin Verlander on the road, and we can get him at $1.30 tonight, and it's a great play. You'd say, hey, Al, I'm with you. It's the biggest play of the entire season. As opposed to betting some other guy at $1.15, you'd go, okay, it's just money. But because you attach that word insurance to it, buying the hook, some of you are like, oh, I can't do that. Again, I can't lead you to the water. I can't make you drink it either. You're either with me or you're against me. So we move forward. Let's talk about this game tonight. It's a tough game. The Saints, of course, are coming off that devastating loss at home to San Francisco. It is not going to affect their playoff seeding if they win this game. If they lose it, it ain't going to be good. But it's not going to affect their playoff seeding. Now, they're going to win the game. Question is, can they cover the 9-point spread? Their defense has been absolutely miserable here at home of late. They've just played bad ball. Matter of fact, here, if I cleared my screen, I had the damn performance for them at home here of late in terms of what they've done defensively. And it's not just been against San Francisco here of late. But when you look at what the defense has done, they gave up the 48 points last week against San Francisco. Their previous home game, they gave up 31 against Carolina. Previous home game against Atlanta, they gave up, what was that one? They gave up 26 points. That, of course, was 26-9 loss. So it's not like they performed great defensively here of late. They lost two important members of their defensive line last week. Defensive end Marcus Davenport, defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, both gone for the season. Now, their defensive line depth has been key to them all season. So they have two more than capable backups. But again, their depth has been hurt. And I think that's going to factor into tonight's game because the Colts are going to come in here and want to run the ball. That's their MO. Marlon Mack has been hurt here recently, but Jonathan Williams, ironically a former member of the New Orleans Saints, filled in admirably with 2 straight 100-yard-plus outings. But Marlon Mack is back. And that offensive line for the Colts, that's what they do. They open holes on the ground. They also provide outstanding pass protection for Jacoby Brissett, who's only been sacked 21 times this season. And the Saints pass rush, although they've got Cam Jordan, is good, but it's not outstanding. So, you've got to wonder, will the Colts be able to get something done here? When you look at the Colts this season, they have only lost one game by a double-digit margin. And they're a 9-point dog here tonight. They constantly are in single-digit scores all year long. 4 straight losses by 1 score. 1 double-digit loss on the entire season. But the Colts have their issues too. You look at what Jameis Winston did to that defense last week. I mean, he just tore them up. Well, now they're going to go against Drew Brees. Jameis Winston, Drew Brees. Is there a comparison here? No. And you saw what Drew Brees did to that 49ers pass defense, number 1 in the league last year. He just scorched them. But then you saw what the Saints defense did as it just totally collapsed, blowing that 20-7 lead, and they end up losing, 48-46 last week? So, I go back and forth of what I think is going to happen in this game. I'm a huge New Orleans Saints fan, right? I'm a huge Drew Brees fan. So I think this could be a game here that the Saints rebound from that loss and they come out and they play some great ball. But then I go, what happened after they lost that game to the Atlanta Falcons, 26-9? They come out the following week, they go to Tampa, and they won the game 34-17, but it was a very lackluster performance. They really didn't look in sync. Okay, but they were on the road. Now they're at home. So is tonight a game that they play much better? Possibly. So I'm going to give the lean to New Orleans, and I'm going to go ahead and say lay the 9 points and go with the Saints. But I'm not betting it because I think the best bet in this game is the total. By far. The over-under is the best bet in this game, and that's the way I'm going to go play it tonight. Now, in college basketball, a couple of games I want to talk about. The first one is going to be actually the El Paso Sun Bowl Invitational Classic down in El Paso. That's why it's called the El Paso Sun Bowl Invitational. It features Kent State against Cal-Irvine. It's a pick-em situation. Kent State 8-1 so far this season. taking on a Cal-Irvine team that last year was the Big West champion, made the big dance, knocked off Kansas State in the first round of the tournament. But remember, Kansas State had all the injury problems last year. But this is not the same Cal-Irvine team from a year ago, because they lost Max Hazards, probably their glue guy from a year ago, who was a grad transfer, then went off to Arizona. This guy was the Big West Tournament MVP of a 31-win team a year ago, a guy who averaged 12.5 points a game, shot 41% from the field, hit nearly 39% of his three-pointers. They lost that guy, one of two key players they lost from that team a year ago. It's been an up and down season for them. This is a team that lost to Detroit. They were a 12.5-point favorite at home. They lost that game by 12 points. Well, Kent State beat that same Detroit team, a Detroit team that's 1-9 on the season, by 35 points just like a week and a half later. So in a pick'em situation here tonight, I like Kent State in this contest. But the reason I didn't use Kent State, I've told you many times that one of the handicapping tools I like to use is KenPom.com. And one of the things at that site that I put a lot of stock in is what they call their non-conference strength of schedule. And that's where they do an evaluation of the team's schedule strength. There's 353 Division I teams. The non-conference strength of schedule for Kent State is 327. Cal-Irvine, 93. I can tell you guys, 90% of the time, when I go against that single factor, I lose. 93 Cal-Irvine, because they lost to Colorado, they lost to TCU, they won at Boise. Kent really hasn't played anybody. Kent State, 327. So although I think that these are two evenly matched teams, I'm going to like Kent State in this neutral court situation. When I look at that disparity between the non-conference strength of schedule, that is just too much for me to overcome, and that's why I backed off the game, although I do like Kent State in this contest. The other game I like, Pittsburgh, minus the 11.5 at home against Northern Illinois. Pitt's been idle for the past 10 days since that 18-point loss at number 1 Louisville 10 days ago that snapped their 5-game winning streak. Northern Illinois has been idle for the past 8 days since back-to-back road losses at 10-2 St. Mary's. They lost that game by 13 points, and then 2 nights later, they lost by 9 points at 4-8 Cal Davis. Now, these two teams, when you look at KenPom, Pittsburgh is ranked 72 overall. Northern Illinois is ranked 160. Non-conference strength of schedule, Pittsburgh 214. Northern Illinois 258. I feel good about this. Another thing that I like about that site is I look at the offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, the adjusted efficiency numbers, which is points scored or points allowed per 100 possessions. And then I look at the differential between those two. Well, when I do the math and I calculate it out, I see a differential of 10.4 points. Well, that's pretty damn close to Pittsburgh tonight, being an 11.5-point favorite. Would I have liked to seen a stronger number? Yes. But the bottom line is this. I look here and I see a Pittsburgh team that plays outstanding defense. A Pittsburgh team that held Louisville on the road to something like 54 points. This is a Pittsburgh team, or 64 points. This is a Pittsburgh team that has the 25th scoring defense in the country. They give up only 59.4 points a game. You know, Northern Illinois only has one scorer. Now, he happens to lead the Mid-American Conference in scoring at 20 points a game. But outside of Eugene German, they don't have anybody to really pace that offense. They played a weaker schedule. I mean, they've only, the best team they played, according to KenPom, is Oakland. Is it Oakland in the Horizon League anymore? God, I don't know where Oakland is anymore. It's not awful. I can't think of it right now. But they haven't played anybody, and Oakland's ranked like number 173. All the other teams they played have been ranked 284 or worse out of 353 Division I teams. They're 1-5 ATS, their last 6 on the road. So I'm going to lay the points with Pittsburgh. The one caveat here that I have to mention is Pittsburgh is horrendous shooting the 3 ball, 25.9% from the 3-point line. You know, when you're laying double digits, it would help if you can occasionally hit the broadside of the barn. You know, occasionally hit a three-pointer. It helps you to get those extra bonus points when you're covering a double-digit spread. So that's the little flaw, the little chink in the armor there that bothers me about that game. But I do like both of those games. They were my second and third favorite plays tonight, and actually they were both ranked equally as my second best plays. So Pitt and Kent State in college hoops, and the New Orleans Saints in the NFL. That'll do it. I wish you well, and talk to you again tomorrow. Good luck, everybody.